Oh, here he is. Fantastic. Right. I've just let him into the waiting room. Hello, Colin. Brilliant. I don't know if I got my sound on. Hello. Hello. Well done. Well done. You've
I
found...
was a bit worried that I wouldn't get there somehow.
It worked. It worked.
Bit of a
Oof,
patch storm that's gone over.
Right. Well, it's a bit hot, isn't it? Are you boiling?
It's still very humid. We had a terrible storm. The wind has done quite a lot of damage, which I'm going to have to work on tomorrow. But quite surprised how
Forceful it was.
Yeah, it's still very sticky. If you hear banjo decided to kick off. Banjo!
Oh, bless. Oh, well, Colin, I'm going to start at the very beginning. I'm going to, as I've done in all of these. Yeah. Yes, indeed. What were you like as a little boy? Were you a daredevil, and did you love dogs?
Well, both, really. My mother bred dogs, mostly standard poodles, which she showed. That was her sole source of income, with breeding and showing, and so we didn't have a lot of money. I was very adventurous as a child and did various crazy things. My mother was always worried that I mean, the first thing I ever did that was a stunt was my father had an old van which had open doors, and we lived in Devon and were going down this very steep hill, and he seemed to be having problems with the brakes, and I fell out of the side of the door and was about 3 years of age and rolled down the hill between the wheels of the car.
Oh,
and didn't actually get run over. I had a few cuts and bruises, but thought it was quite fun, and so maybe that was the precursor for things that happened later on.
And were any of your mum's dogs particularly close to you? I mean,
Well, yes, we all, as children, we all had our own dog, as it were. My first dog, and it's funny that this should have been the case, my mother bred standard poodles, but she took in various other dogs at different times. She was a sucker to rescuing local dogs that had been abandoned. There was no rescues about in those days. And she rescued this border collie, which got in with one of the poodles when she was on heat and produced a border poodle cross, which I had, Minnie. And of course, Minnie looked like a working bearded collie.
Oh, wow.
So although she wasn't, she was a border collie cross standard poodle. She did look very similar, and so whether that had a decision on my own, the decision that I made, because I did love the poodles, and unfortunately we had financial problems, and mother had to sell and rehome a lot of the dogs, unfortunately, that were not productive, and Minnie, my one, had to go home, which was sad, but then I had one of the poodles instead. Yes, I've always had dogs, and this is Lottie. This is Lottie.
Oh, Lottie's beautiful.
She's a bearded border cross. She's very, very into toys, which is why you see me throwing things over my face. keep her nice. And that's Banjo. Extremely nice.
Oh, I've met Banjo. Yes.
Banjo!
Okay, so when times obviously got quite hard, so how old were you when all that happened? Were you still a schoolboy, or were you?
Sorry, could you say that again? Sorry.
When the financial hardship sort of happened, were you still a schoolboy, or were
yes, very much. I mean, I actually, in hindsight, I quite was happy the fact that we didn't have much money as a kid, because you get to appreciate it more when you go out and make it yourself.
Yes.
Which is, people who get handed a lot of money for doing nothing do not really understand the value of money when they do get it.
Yes.
They haven't had to work hard for it. So the fact that we were impoverished in a way as children was not a bad thing. we got fed. We didn't starve. We had a really very pleasant childhood out in the country in Devon. It's just that we didn't have any luxuries. We didn't even have electricity till I was 16.
Wow.
So we lived a fairly frugal existence, but I think I'm a better person for it. I wouldn't have wanted to have everything handed to me on a plate.
No.
Quite honest.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have 2 brothers. Banjo, what are you eating? Excuse me. Oh, it's gone now. Yes, Nicholas, I see regularly. He lives in Devon still. He went back to Devon. He's an art dealer. And I bought a cottage down in the village where he now lives 18 years ago, and I still go there when I have the chance. So, yes, I see him quite often.
Mm-hmm.
But no girls in our family. We're all boys. On mine, I have 4 cousins who are also boys. It seems to run in the family. I would quite like to have had a sister, but we didn't have one. That's the way it goes.
Okay, so when you were you an academic boy? Were you good at school?
Academic. I was not a very well-behaved child at school. I loved sports, and that was what enabled me to finish my studies, because I did represent the school in various sports: gymnastics, athletics, swimming and diving. And I always remember when I left school, the headmaster called me into his study and he said, "Skeaping, it will take 7 years for your influence to wear off this school, and don't regard that as a compliment." So I did leave my mark, but possibly not the way that the teachers would have liked.
No.
Yes, I didn't study very hard. I enjoyed having what one would now call a good time, but I did love my sport, and I did compete successfully and worked hard at the sport, and that did give the school a reasonably good name in different sports. So it wasn't all bad.
No. So what was your favourite sports then? What were you naturally?
My natural ones that I went on to compete in to a high standard were gymnastics and diving. And obviously, from the stunt point of view, gymnastics is a very, very valuable sport. I wanted to do motorsport from an early age, but you needed money for that. So I started off competing in diving and was hopefully getting to the British squad. But in those days, when I got my first stunt job, it was doing a diving commercial for Persil. And unfortunately, in those days, if you earned any money as a sport, you could no longer compete as an amateur. These days, of course, they're paid for everything. They're paid to get up off their backs, and they're paid for everything. But when I was competing, you weren't supposed to even be paid expenses. You had to, do everything without any financial remuneration. And because I had gone and earned money doing a commercial in my sport, diving, the Amateur Swimming Association, who was in control there, said, "Sorry, you can no longer compete as an amateur. You are now professional." So there you go. But I'd already decided I wanted to be a stuntman. So
how did you come to that decision? Because I can't imagine the careers teacher going,
"Oh no, nothing to do with it." They just really wanted to see the back of me, really. No, it was, I thought perhaps I should be a physical training instructor. But then I started at college, but I realised that really I wanted to be a doer and not a teacher of others. I wanted to, partake in the sports that I loved, but to make money out of it and what have you. And that was when I first came up to London, and I registered in various agencies for stunt work, because at the time there was no stunt register. And so I got various jobs from agents to start with. And then I got offered a stage show, The Four Musketeers with Harry Seacombe, at Drury Lane. And that ran for 15 months. And all the private coaching and teaching that I was doing to supplement my income at the time, then unfortunately had to go because of the hours that I did my teaching, i.e. 4 o'clock after school time, and then teaching fitness clubs in the evening and that sort of thing, all had to go because the hours of the stage show clashed 100% with the hours that I needed to do my coaching and teaching. So that was when I became a full-time professional at stunt work after that show. And it was a lot of fun because there was a lot of things like high falls off the rafters, sword fights, hand balancing, acrobatics. We had a horse on stage. And, it was, I would say it ran for 15 months and it was a lot of fun. But then I was committed to full-time stunt work from then on. And what really came good for me was when they formed the stunt register, we formed the stunt register in 1972. So that all the people who were currently working as stunt people could then join this register. And we sent out a book to all production companies and producers and directors from which they could then choose the people they wanted. And it was a door opening moment for me, because from then on there were only 7 of us under 35 anyway who were actively on that register, and because of the skills that I had, which not many of the others had, I was immediately in demand. And fortunately, I've been very lucky. I made a very good living at the time when stunts were really stunts. There was no CGI rubbish. Nothing was knocked up on a computer. Everything was done for real. So I was in it at the best time.
So, going back, when you got that job with Harry Seacombe and you moved to London, wasn't that quite a daunting thing to do? Because you must have been living in Devon. It must have been pretty quiet there. And all of a sudden you move into central London, and you were quite, how old were you? You were quite a young man.
I was 21, I think, 2021 when I first came up to London, and I stayed with some friends in Finchley to start with, sharing a bedroom with one of the oldest sons, and it was a bit chaotic to start with because we didn't have mobile phones in those days. I didn't have because I was living in digs. I had to get work calls had to come in on the neighbour's phone. They would ring up the neighbour to where I was living, and they would pass messages on, and then I'd have to get back to them by using a phone box. And that was how it happened in those days. We didn't, people today with all their technology and mobile communications, what have you, don't realise what it was like in those days when you didn't have any of this. So it was quite hard to get in to start with because of that lack of contactability.
Yeah. And did you have to audition for that first job? Did you?
Yeah, I did for the commercial, yeah.
Oh, right. If we go back to the Purcell one, yeah. How did you hear about that? I mean,
as I said, I signed on with 2 or 3 agents, and the production companies contact the agents and say, have you got somebody who can do this, that, and the other? So my first few jobs before the stunt register came out were all through these agents who would send me up for auditions to do these jobs. And of course the Purcell commercial, because I know I went to Crystal Palace to do to show them what I could do, and they booked me on that White Up Than White. I do remember a terrible drama that happened. It was extremely cold. It was when we did the job. It was the 2nd of May 1967, and it was at Hastings Open Air swimming pool, and which had a 10-metre diving board, which is the highest. And it was extremely cold. And after doing this handstand double somersault all day long for hour after hour, I was absolutely frozen to death at the end of the day. So I hung my swimming costume over the radiator in the chalet where we were staying, and unfortunately it caught fire. So in the first thing in the morning, the producers had to rush all over Hastings to try and find, it was a Speedo costume, I can remember it now, try and find a costume that matched the one that I had. The good thing about it was it was delayed shooting for an hour, and it was a little bit warmer by the time we started.
Yes.
And I do remember that was a big mistake, hanging it over this open radiator to try and dry it off as quick as possible.
Do you know if that still exists, that first commercial?
I don't know. I never even saw it, to be quite honest. The next job I did was also diving. It was a film called Dandy in Aspic with Lawrence Harvey. Do you remember Lawrence Harvey?
No.
He was a well-known actor, but he was also a director.
Oh, right. Okay.
Typical British upper crust sort of type character, and he played and directed in this film Dandy in Aspic, and I had to play a foreign agent who got shot in a swimming pool in the middle of a fancy dive. So it was a question of deliberately going wrong halfway through. But it's also some acting was involved with it. So that was the second job I did. And I worked on Charge of the Light Brigade for a short while when they came back to this country and did a bit of, it was down at Greenwich, I think I worked there. And I think that then I got auditioned for the Four Musketeers and then went into that. And it was shortly after that ended in January 1971 that I carried on with various other sort of short jobs that came to the agents. And then, of course, when the formation of the Stud Register in 1972, then the film work started to come.
Everything started to pick up. So, but on the long run, like the Harry Seacombe one, did you get to know the cast very well? I mean, was it like a community that you all...
Very much so. 15 months, you living in the same theatre, Royal Drury Lane, was a big old theatre. And we used to have a lot of fun with them. There were about 6 stuntmen, and we used to have a lot of fun and practicing our high falls. I can remember we were doing falls off the top of the theatre in the lunch hour and that sort of thing, or after the matinee, and the general public would be shocked because they couldn't see because in those days you didn't have airbags. You had to fall onto packed cardboard boxes or very, very deep foam rubber type things. And so we took our foam rubber beds up and put them on the veranda at the halfway down, and they couldn't be seen from the road, and we were having fights on the top and falling off into the thing. And several times the police were called by members of the public who thought they had been killed, and we were eventually advised that we shouldn't do that anymore. So we did have a lot of fun doing that show, and Harry Seacombe was great to work with.
Oh, that's nice, because you hope people are going to be nice, and he seemed a really lovely.
He was a really nice guy, but he had lived so much that no 2 nights were the same, which was great fun. So there was this scene where the lady, the heroine of the thing, throws back this. No, she's in bed, and Harry. It's a big 4-poster bed with curtains around it on the stage, and he draws back the curtains to reveal luscious milady lying on the bed, and he dives in and the curtains get drawn. So on the last night we asked her not to do that scene, and all 6 stuntmen got in the bed, and when he threw back, and he didn't know this, and he threw back the curtains, and he sort of double take, and he looked in the audience, he said, "Oh, in for a penny, in for a pound," and he launched himself onto the bed with all of it. So that kind of thing, it was a lot of fun to do that.
So a good first steady job there.
Yes, that's right. Taking in regular money every week, which is all I needed to be able to sort of build up a basis to be able to get props and stuff that I needed as a stuntman and what have you. And
because there was obviously no Google in those days, no YouTube. So how do you learn how to be a stuntman? I mean, were you made?
You learn on the job in those days. Yeah. It was far more dangerous than it is now, because you didn't have today. The stunt coordinators who are in charge of film work are always very experienced stuntmen who know how to set things up, and that we have the rules now that new people have to go up through a probation and qualification scheme to get up, and they can't work on their own for at least 5 years. Mm-hmm. And none of that existed in my original day, where you had to go out and prove yourself by basically being prepared to take a bigger risk than somebody else in order to show that you were the person who could do the job. So you learned on the job a lot, and yes, there were accidents. I had to do a high fall after somebody else. We had to fight on the rafters in something. They didn't have quite enough boxes. I had to knock him off and then get shot off myself. and he just got out the way in time, but unfortunately he'd already flattened the boxes, so I landed in a load of boxes already pretty flat from about 35 feet, and I fractured my pelvis. That sort of thing would never have happened later on, because there would have always been a stunt coordinator to ensure that everything was right for performance. You wouldn't be able to take an unqualified risk like that in the later times, but in the early 1970s and up through to the early 1980s, the risk factor was still very high.
Yeah, health and safety hadn't really been.
Oh, they didn't. We kept them out the whole picture for a very long time. Fortunately, it was companies like the BBC started to get worried and started to send these health and safety people in. But when you think that these people are good at ticking boxes and they walk around with their clipboards and their hard hats, but they really don't know a thing about stunt work. So at the end of the day, we just had to keep them quiet and keep them in a corner and feed them peanuts, if you see what I mean, to enable them to let us carry on and do what we really wanted.
Right. So you'd pretty much learned as you on the job. You don't. How did you get over a fractured pelvis? Surely that put you off work for a while.
No, it didn't for an awful. I can remember. It was only a hairline fracture. They didn't discover it in the hospital for a few days because they couldn't see what was wrong there. They eventually did an X-ray on the pelvis. And I recovered fairly quickly. And I can remember I was carrying on my training, and because I was a gymnast, I could walk around on my hands rather than have to use crutches. So I'd go do my swimming, my diving training and what have you, and walk around on my hands rather than crutches. So I got over it fairly quickly, and unfortunately it never troubled me at any stage later in life.
That's good. That's good. So, right, you start the stunt register, and all of a sudden, interesting, exciting work starts to come in. So, what was your first big job that you? It's
hard to remember. I can remember doing a film early on called "One of Our Dinosaurs Is Missing."
Right.
Peter Ustinov, we had in it. Clive Revel, I think, was in it. There were various other. It was a Disney movie. It was a sort of action comedy with quite a lot of stunts in it. And I remember I had to ride this 1914 motorcycle and sidecar with a wickerwork sidecar, dressed as Joan Sims. I don't know if you remember Joan Sims.
Yes.
She did the Carry On movies and that sort of thing. Anyway, I had two other stunt ladies, one behind me on the pillion and one in the sidecar. And we had lots of sort of high speed running around with this thing, with the sidecar, and I had to ride it with the sidecar in the air the whole time. So the sidecar wheel was never on the ground. So going all over the place on two wheels with the sidecar up in the air. And, with near misses with other vehicles and what have you. And I do remember there was a dog in that, and this was before I'd done any work with animals. And somebody had a dog. They had to jerk it out of the way just at the very last minute, and I had to just clear the dog's head with the wheel of the sidecar. And I was a bit more concerned about the safety of the dog, I can remember, than about the safety of the other stunt people I was working with.
Yes.
And I do remember it was quite risky for the dog. Fortunately, I never hit it, never injured it. But there was a lot of kung fu in that too. I studied kung fu early on when it was in the Bruce Lee days, when it became very popular. So I could, with my gymnastics and what have you, being able to do martial arts was a good money maker. And so we did do a lot of kung fu during that movie. And I can remember, we had this, I can't remember what his name was, but he was a Asian kung fu expert, and he worked with us on it. So it was a very useful film in as much as I got new skills on it. And as a stuntman whose qualifications relied on their athleticism, it was very important to learn as many skills as you possibly could And another one I embarked on when it became very fashionable was skateboarding. I did a lot of skateboarding, stunts, handstands on skateboards, crashing into cars on skateboards. And I can remember we're going down a hill on a skateboard and somebody has to open a car door and I had to crash into the door and go over the top of the door on the skateboard, that kind of thing. Well, I can't remember what production that was in. But one of my dinosaurs, as I say, was one of the first long-term major productions that I worked on. And that would have been about, well, when the registered firms formed, that's like 72, 73, something like that.
And where was that filmed? Was that in the UK or did you have to go?
Well, we were based at Pinewood Studios.
Oh, right.
So it was filmed on location. I mean, when you're doing a period thing set in 1914, you're limited to a certain extent where you can shoot. But so a lot of the set was built at Pinewood Studio, the street sets and what have you. But then we did go around some of the local towns and what have you, and villages, and do some stuff as well. So yeah, I'm not sure. I suppose it was about 4 or 5 months' work, and it was probably the first film that I was on for all the way through, as it were.
Brilliant. And what did your mum think of all this? Because did she worry that you were going to end up sort of really hurting yourself?
Well, she was. My mother was very understanding, and she was a bit long-suffering in as much as she was worried. And whenever I said I was going to come and visit her, I'd always say, because she knew how I drove, I always used to make out I was going to be an hour later than I was, so that if I was a bit later than I intended to be, she wouldn't suddenly panic because she said, "Oh, you're early," because I said, "Oh, yes, I am, aren't I?" But unfortunately, I lost my mother in 1974. She was only 64, so she didn't really see my career flourish to what it became. She had cancer, unfortunately. So, yes, so I was only 26, I think, when I lost her.
That's awful. Oh, so really, you were at the start of it all kicking off and being wonderful. So what was the next big film or the next job that was like a really sort of wow?
I did Murphy's War, which was Peter O'Toole film. A bit in South America on that, and then quite a lot of stuff in a tank in Malta. And this tank was, it was a battle sequence, a big ship sinking and what have you. And because the tank in Malta had the sea behind it, it made it look like the open sea. So there were several weeks spent in Malta on that one. There was a lot of odd short span jobs that went on at the same time, a lot of things, and I'd have to have my memory jogged as to some of them.
I have printed out your extensive what is it called, IMDb list, which it goes on for pages.
Yes, I never really. I was very lucky. I never really stopped through my career. Up till I got hit by Lyme disease. That was what finished it off for me.
Oh no! Well, we'll get on to Lyme disease because I think that's something everyone's going to be interested in. Yeah. Right. I've gone back to the beginning here. So, 68, A Dandy in Aspic.
That was the one I mentioned with Lawrence Harvey. Yes.
Yeah.
The diving one getting shot. Yep.
71, Blood from the Mummy's Tomb.
Yes, I can remember a little bit on that. It was just odd stunts. I know I had to go backwards through a window, doubling. I think it was an actor called Aubrey Morris. So he probably doesn't ring a bell, but he's one of these character actors that if you saw his face, you would recognize his face. Yes, I can remember that one.
Well, the next one is quite a big one. 1973, Live and Let Die.
Yes, that was the first Bond film, I think.
That's quite a biggie.
that was based at Pinewood Studios. We did go to Malta, some motorcycle car stuff on that, but also a lot of stuff in the tank at Pinewood where they built these submarines and what have you. And there was a lot of people being shot and blown up and falling off rafters and fire and that kind of stuff. Yes, so that was again at Pinewood Studios, and it was quite a longish run. Yeah, I can remember that one.
Who was James Bond in in those
That
days?
was, I think, Roger Moore's first one. I think. I know. I know it was. He was the star in it, and because I did a couple of others that he was in, but I think they were later on. So I think it. I mean, don't quote me on this because I'm not a historian, but it may well have been his first Bond.
Right. Was he lovely? Because
yes, he was. He was.
Yeah.
The sort of actor the stuntman likes, because he used to say, I'm not interested in doing my own stunts. You go and make me look good. And that's what we like to hear. The type of actor we don't like is those who said, oh, I don't need a stuntman. I can do it all myself. And they're the ones that are difficult to work with because they have this inflated idea of their own level of skill. And you had to get to them by saying, now, look, we know you're brilliant at this, but if I hurt myself, I can send another person along in my place tomorrow. So the company won't lose out if I get hurt, but the company will lose out if you get hurt because you're irreplaceable. So you're bolstering their ego at the same time, as instead of saying, piss off, you're not doing it's too great. It's both boosting their ego and they would think, oh yes, okay, fair enough.
Yes.
But, as I say, Roger Moore was great to work with because he and another guy who similar vein who I worked with for years and years and years, lovely guy. Much later on was John Nettles. He was another actor who was quite happy to let the stuntmen do the stunts, and take it back role.
Oh, that's it. Everybody's got their own job, haven't they? You don't want to step on anyone's toes. After that, Space 1999. Now that's very familiar. That's the
Pinewood series. Again, falls, being shot. I can remember doing it. In fact, everybody wanted to do it because it was a good money earner. But there was this fall down a lift shaft for one of the stuntmen being shot backwards, having to fall down this lift shaft, but not being able to land on the boxes. You had to disappear out of shot. So I put them all the rig at 45 degrees so that you hit your landing rig and then it shot you out to the left, out of the frame. Now, because it was a good money earner, that one, because it was quite dangerous, I can remember between me and two other stuntmen as who should do it. So I think we flipped a coin or something, and I was the lucky one I got to do it. So I made the money out of that. And that was at Pinewood Studios, and that would have been about 70, 71, 72, I don't know, I'm not so brilliant on dates.
But according to this, there's a couple more things, like London Conspiracy and Side by Side, and then Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Now, I thought you were, what was, because I lose track of what order the Star Wars films are in.
In the New Hope, which is only what they called it recently, it was known as Star Wars in that day because it was the first one. That was shot in 1976. In the chronological order of that would have been Episode 4.
Right.
Because the prequels, there were 3 prequels, and then you had Episode 4, Star Wars, which they now call New Hope. Episode 5 was The Empire Strikes Back, and Episode 6 was The Return of the Jedi. So those were the 3 that I worked on, and that was in 1976, 79, and 82. We shot those, and they were released the following year.
So the first Star Wars, I don't think they didn't know it was going to be huge.
Oh no, it was just I was asked to do it by the stunt coordinator, a friend of mine, Peter Darman, and he said, I'm doing this little kiddie science fiction film. It's only a 12-week shoot. Are you free? And if you are, do you fancy being a double for the actor who you're a good size for? There's a lot of stuff being shot and running around as well as stormtroopers. And also doubling Mark Hamill. He said, did I fancy doing it? And I thought, well, I'm free. I'll do it. I said, okay, Peter, fine, I'll do it. I even had to fit it in with another couple of jobs. So I know I left the shoot a week early because I was already booked to play the flying monk of Malmesbury. and do a week's show flying off the top of Malmesbury Cathedral, or Abbey, I'm not sure which it was, for a week to celebrate the British Tourist Festival or something.
Oh my goodness.
So I had no idea. I did my 12 weeks on Star Wars, didn't think anything more about it, had no idea that today I would still be signing autographs and going to conventions for a job that I did, 40 years ago.
It is extraordinary. When I knew I was interviewing you, I went and had a little look on Facebook and found various groups of people who all they talk about is like
unbelievable. I mean, I think it's a bit nerdy, to be quite honest. People whose whole lives are bound up with Star Wars characters and the things that they'll pay to buy or to see, and the merchandising. I mean, if I'd had a cut on the percentage of the merchandising, I'd have made a fortune.
Yeah.
But of course, those days you just got paid your fee as a stuntman, and that was it. You never made any money out of all the sequels and repeats or anything like that, and nothing out of the all the merchandising stuff.
No. But what was the stunt that what was the biggest stunt that people would remember from the first Star Wars movie?
Well, the first Star Wars one, it was not a very stunty movie at all. There was because the budget was quite small. Excuse me, I've got a ball in my hand. It's Lottie's. Because the budget was quite small, and it was mostly shot at EMI Studios at Elstree on sets. So most of the action involved sort of running around as stormtroopers, being shot or blown up or falling off this or falling off that. And the only stuff doubling Mark Hamill was mostly setting up and doing the flight across the chasm where he and Princess Leia swing across this chasm. All the loads of stunts that I subsequently did on the other two were not involved in the first one. And of course, The Empire Strikes Back, that was nearly a year's work, as was Return to the Jedi. So they were totally different sort of movies. There was a lot more money and a lot more spent on locations and everything else, because by that time they realised they were on to a winner.
Yes. And what was the camaraderie like on Star Wars? Because I guess you were all the ones who were in the first movie saw it take off. So were you like sort of, if you were in the first one, you were the old school? I mean, did you get to know the cast very well?
Well, yes, you do. In most films you work on, if you're on it regularly, especially if you work with actors or actresses over a period of time, you get to know them as people. To me, I've always been a down-to-earth sort of person, and I take people as I find them. I don't care what their reputation is or what their standing is. I treat people as they treat me. And so you work with a lot of people, and some become good friends, and that friendship lasts for years and years and years after you finish working with them. With a lot of others, it's a professional job only. You don't have a lot in common, and you don't have anything to do with them outside of the filming. It's all down to the individual, like it is in any form of life.
Yeah.
For example, Harrison Ford became a very good friend. I loved Harrison Ford. I did subsequent films with him after all the Star Wars stuff, and saw him socially, and we had a great time together, especially when we were working in the States on Return of the Jedi. Mark Hamill, who I was doubling, who played Luke Skywalker, I never got as close to him. I suppose it's hard to say. He did keep himself very much to himself and didn't go out and socialise. I mean, when, for example, Carrie Fisher, who played Princess Leia, and Harrison, they would come out with us in the evenings when we were on location and enjoy a good times like some people would. I never got that with Mark Hamill. He never joined us on any evenings out and never took part in anything, and so I never really got to know him as a person in the same way that I did both Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford.
Oh.
But you take people as you find them.
Yes, I remember when I was, because it's usually I struggle to get you to tell me anything of these things when we're talking, but you did reveal that you did once get banned from going out drinking with Harrison because
we did, unfortunately. It was because we decided to go to this. We were in Yuma, Arizona, and the hotel was one side of this dual carriageway, and the place where we decided to spend our evening was the other side. And we asked them, how big a pizza can you make for all of us? And this pizza came out and it covered a huge cake, about 6 foot diameter. And of course, copious amounts of alcohol had to help wash it all down. And by the time we finished, Carrie Fisher and Harrison were as inebriated as the rest of us. I can remember we were crawling across the dual carriageway on our hands and knees when two of the producers came out of the hotel and saw us staggering across the dual carriageway, narrowly being missed by passing traffic. And the edict of the next day was that the artists would no longer be allowed to fraternise with the stunt people in the evenings. So that was that story.
And did Harrison behave himself, or did
for a
he?
while till we changed location. We went then to Crescent City in Northern California, which is a very different sort of location. We did all the giant redwood forest stuff with the Ewok characters and that sort of thing, and that again was a different sort of scenario, a different location, well away from the tourist parts of California. California is a funny state; it's very long and thin. So Northern California is nothing like Los Angeles or San Francisco, which are much further south. It's a much more British type climate up there, and you get colder winters, and you're right next to the Rocky Mountains. And I loved that place, Crescent City, because it was so natural and so it wasn't starstruck in the same way as. And I can remember Tracy Eden, one of the stunt girls, and we had a day off. And we thought, well, what can we do? We haven't got our own transport. And we found this gym in Crescent City where we go and train in the evenings. And the guy who owned the gym, he said, what are you doing on your day off? I said, we're not really sure. We're a bit stuck. He said, look, I've got this car. Borrow my car and you can go up into the mountains for the day. And he had a Chevrolet Corvette. And I can remember we borrowed the car and we had a great day out. And it was somebody who we'd only just made his acquaintance maybe a week or so before, and he'd entrusted us with his car, and it was very nice. And we had a lovely day out.
Gosh. But so really, you've gone from the peace and quiet of Devon to London, and now California, and going out with a group of crazy people who really, really know how to party, and you've got friends who are international superstars, but you're not really that interested in celebrity.
Not at all.
No. So you're just having it. It sounds like just an amazing life. I mean, were you just not really thinking about it? You were just in the moment and just having fun.
That's right. You enjoy it at the time. Obviously, you have to be professional in your work. It's very important for your own safety and in order to give them the work that they wanted to do, good quality stuff. You have to obviously take the job very seriously. But because you take the job so seriously, you then feel that you've got the license to have a bit of fun when you're off set and that kind of thing.
But you fitted into because there must have been lots of American stuntmen, and yet you're working in America. So were there some things that you could do that maybe other people couldn't?
Everybody has, you have to be a physical jack of all trades in a way and do as many different skills as you can. But obviously also having specialities, that sort of acrobatic type stuff was one of my specialities. I mean, cars and motorcycles were as well. But early on in my career, there weren't very many gymnasts who were good stuntmen, and therefore a lot of the work that I got was because of my skill, acrobatic type skills, to be able to fly through the air and that kind of stuff, which was probably why I got the Star Wars billings, and certainly the second two, where there was a lot of falling and flying and that kind of thing. But it was down to that sort of skill. And you've got to give them value for money, but at the same time it's nice when you're relaxing to be able to go out and have a good time as well.
Yes. Oh, it sounds wonderful. I'm looking back on your list of things. You were in the Sweeney, So that was the original Sweeney, I guess. With
That's right. Yes, no, yeah. with TV stuff, because I started, and this takes me back to dogs to a certain extent. I started not then because that was earlier on, but from the mid-80s onwards, I decided to do more TV so I could live at home more, so that I could then go from only having one dog to maybe having more, and But Sweeney was, I think it was Pinewood Studios again. I think it was based at. And with all those TV series, you would get called when they needed a skill that you would do, or you could double somebody, for example. So there'd be a lot of physical work involved in things like Sweeney, but also car and van chases and that kind of thing as well. So that they were fun to work on, but you'd only, you get an episode where you might get called on, do 2 or 3 days, and then you maybe get a call in a month's time to go back on another episode and do another few days. So the Sweeney and the Professionals, and there were other series like what was the one called with a bit earlier before that, The Protectors with Nairi Dawn Porter and yes, I think it was The Protectors. There were 2 at Pinewood at the time, Protectors and The Persuaders. One of them had Tony Curtis and Roger Moore in it, and the other one had Nairi Dawn Porter and American actor, I can't remember his name. I think he died recently. I can't remember. But anyway, they were shot at the same time, although they were quite different. I worked on the one with Nairi Dawn Porter, not the one with Roger Moore and Tony Curtis.
Right.
Although I did come across Tony Curtis outside work because he used to go around the studio with his entourage and himself. And I remember a little anecdote going into the bar at Pinewood at lunchtime. In my studios at lunchtime. And Lionel Jeffries was in there. Now, Lionel Jeffries was a British character actor, but he was directing The Railway Children at the time. And he was sitting in the bar at Pinewood, EMI, sorry. And in walked Tony Curtis with all his entourage. And as he walked up to Lionel Jeffries, he patted him on the stomach and said, "Hey, Lionel, what are you going to call it?" Lionel Jeffries sort of looked him up and down and said, "If it's a boy, I'm going to call it Bert. If it's a girl, I'm going to call it Sue. But if it's what I think it is, all wind and piss, I'm going to call it Tony Curtis."
Very good.
So that was a real put down in those days. I can remember that because I was in the bar at the time.
Oh, very good. Very good. Oh, dear. Yes, I suspected he might be a bit like that. On the list here, Flash Gordon and Superman 2.
Yeah. Superman's I did a lot on all the Supermans. I played the helicopter pilot when the helicopter crashed on top of the building. I think that would have been Superman 1 because it was confusing because Superman 1 and 2 were shot together. And so you were never quite sure whether what you were doing, which of the 2 movies it was going to appear in. So I know I played the helicopter pilot, and I think it was Superman 1, but then there was a lot of stuff on Superman 2, and also Supergirl. And I went to Calgary and Alberta on one of them, can't remember which one it was, again, general stunts. Got set on fire when a fireball exploded in my face, climbing up a ladder, which the timing was of the special effects was a bit wrong. I can remember that. But we had fun in Calgary. It was a nice place. That was one of the Supermans.
Did you have to learn how to fly a helicopter to do the helicopter stunts?
Well, I had a very quick. I never got my pilot's license, unfortunately, because I never got the hours in. But I had Mark Wolf, a very well-known helicopter pilot in the industry, because they wanted a stuntman to play the part and the character. I had sort of a crash course in controlling it, but the vast majority of the stuff in the helicopter was actually done hanging on a cable. The helicopter was a mock-up, and it was on top of this building. So all I had to do with the real one was to be seen bringing it, trying to get it into position and what have you. So my skill level, in helicopters is not. I couldn't go out and get in one now and without needing a bit more instruction because I'm a bit rusty. I can have a go. But,
have a go. Oh dear. And was it Christopher Reeve who was Superman?
Christopher Reeve played Superman, yes.
Yeah, and was he?
He was a lovely guy. Yep. You've frozen. I've lost you, Beverly.
Hey, well, I've got an internet problem. You're back again. You're back again.
Yes, he disappeared for just a few seconds. Yes, he was a lovely guy, Christopher Reeve, because I did all the first flying stuff for him because I was light and they wanted to use things called teeter boards. You've seen them in circuses where people stand on one end of looks like a seesaw. Somebody else big and heavy jumps on one end and you get catapulted up into the air. I did a lot of that doubling Christopher Reeve because I was light and agile. So we had big heavy stuntmen jumping on the other end and sending me up into the air to sort of, and I was credited with doing Superman's first flight, I think, as a result of that.
That's quite a biggie. Gosh. And I remember from talking to you before that the most risky one that you ever did was it one of the James Bond stunts was potentially the most dangerous because the helicopter just took off and you ended up having to fall a lot.
No, that was in The Empire Strikes Back.
Oh right.
The mountains in northern Norway were very high up, the air was thin, and unbeknown to Mark, the helicopter pilot, and myself, the helicopter had to be put in undercover at night because otherwise everything would freeze up and had to be heated up to keep it from freezing up. And the props people had to push the helicopter that was on skids into this little hangar. And without telling anybody that they'd done it, they caught one of the rotor blades on the sides that was going in and bent it. Not so you could visibly notice it, but it's like if your wheels out of balance on a car, you don't notice it visibly, but you do notice it when you drive. And when we got up in the air, I was hanging on this parachute, so I had to just drop into the snow from about 40 feet, hanging on this pendulum. And Mark, I could tell he was out of control. And I looked down and I could see all the film crew way below me. I thought, we're much higher than we should be. We're not in the right position. And the thing was, Mark's trying to control the helicopter, and I was now starting to swing from side to side.
Oh my goodness.
And I knew I couldn't hold on indefinitely. I wasn't cabled on or anything because I had to drop off anyway. So I decided I couldn't hold on much longer. So I looked down below me and I could see rocks below me, rocks to the right, but white virgin snow to the left. So I waited till I got a maximum swing to the left and let go, and I sort of somersaulted to the air, what seemed to take forever, and I landed in a deep snowdrift just 4 feet away from the rocks, and I only had a slightly twisted ankle, so I was quite lucky. And they were guessed that I'd fallen about 70 feet.
Gosh. And did that end up in the film?
No, it didn't, because they didn't film it because they never got the thing in the right place. Then what we did then was build a platform like a 10-meter diving board in the center of the frozen lake in Finster where we were, and all I had to do then was climb to the top, jump off. In the film, that would be one of the Walker characters. We have these great big creatures walking across the snowscape, and Luke Skywalker had to launch up into the air, place a bomb underneath one, and drop down, and that would have been used for that.
Gosh. Wow, the inside. So yeah, that could very nearly have been the end of Colin.
Yes, it could have been the end of Colin, but luckily it wasn't.
But I see you were in the Great Muppet Caper.
Yes,
I wouldn't have thought there'd be many stunts in Muppets.
Funny enough, you're wrong. It was full of stunts. There's a big car chase down in London. A lot of stuff at EMI Studios. I can remember doubling one of the Muppets. I'm not sure if it was Gonzo or driving this bus all over Piccadilly late at night, for real. And when in amongst the traffic, you're in this old bus with all the musicians, the Muppet musicians, all playing away while I'm doubling this Muppet, herring through the traffic and what have you. No traffic wasn't stopped or anything like that. We just mixed it with the traffic. And then I did another chase sequence in an old Austin A35, doubling another Muppet, and had to crash through the lobby in this hotel at Paddington and end up against the desk. And I can remember Miss Piggy and Kermit saying, "Well, we're actually on the second floor." And I said, "I'm sorry, I can only take you as far as the lobby." Yeah, and then there was a lot of stuff. I doubled Miss Piggy doing motorcycle jumps, and also diving in a swimming pool, doing a dive into a swimming pool, doubling Miss Piggy. Driving a 12-ton cement truck, also doubling Miss Piggy, because Peter Ustinov had to be pulled out of his cab by Miss Piggy, who then jumped into the cab, head off up the road to get to this gallery where there was a bomb or something.
I must look out this movie. Peter Ustinov in a Muppet.
Peter Ustinov had a bit part in it. Yes. Yeah. Yes,
did you have anything to do with him? Because I've got a very strange anecdote about Peter Ustinov. Very oddly, I was for a while I was being looked after by a very nice, very wealthy Swedish lady who had Irish wolfhounds, and she let me stay in her house, in her flat, when I worked at the Kennel Club and had no money. And my boyfriend at the time found it very difficult to know what to say to this lady, because she was like, she had plane timetables like most people have train timetables, and she just had a really interesting life, and she was married to the boss of the William Morris agency, so she just knew everybody. Anyway, we were watching television and Peter Ustinov was on the telly, and my boyfriend at the time said, "I really like Peter Ustinov," and Dagmar said, "He's such a fantastic dinner guest." And this
yes, a little bit.
Yes, not in the same. Her experience.
Yeah, no, he was a nice guy to work with, because, of course, he starred in One of Our Dinosaurs Is Missing, which we referred to earlier on. He played the lead character in that, and
a real character.
It was a cameo role in the Great Muppet Caper.
Yes.
If you do get a chance to see it, there's a lot of action in it. It's a lot of fun to do.
I'm going to dig that one out now.
Yeah.
And American Werewolf in London is a pretty iconic movie as well.
Yeah, so good fun. We did a huge car crash in Piccadilly Circus on that, but the police said, "We can't give you permission to do it, but you've got to block the streets to other people, make sure nobody gets in your way, and you've got to clear all the cars off in 3 minutes." So we planned it like a military operation, because we had to spin this bus around and people had to fall out the bus, and so what we decided to do, we had breakdown trucks hidden down every road to pull the Z cars out the way in super quick time, and other stunt people who were not involved in the actual sequence having to block the roads through traffic, while we quickly were rushed out, did the stunt, everybody crashing in all directions, and then sending all the tow trucks in quickly to get all the dead cars out as quickly as we possibly could. So it was quite, we rehearsed that for weeks. It had to be like a military operation.
Oh, wow.
Do it.
What great fun, though, doing it.
Yeah.
And Tales of the Unexpected. Now, did you meet, I forgot what his name is now, the amazing guy that wrote all that?
I did work on those, but again, it was just odd days, and I'm trying to think who it was that starred in that.
I think it varied, didn't it? Each one.
Yes, they had it. That's right. They did. I can't even remember his name. I can remember doing one, which was driving an Edwardian car of some kind.
It says stunt driver. Death in the Morning. It was 1982. This, according to here, but they were. Everyone watched Tales of the Unexpected, because there was nothing on television in those days, was there? But it was a Sunday night, I think, and they were really quite spooky.
Yes, no, I'd say just odd jobs on that kind of thing. I think that's where I met Celia Imrie, who was a nice lady who I worked with a lot at the time. And
Cat lady.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not kept in touch with her, but I can just remember what fun she was to work with at the time.
But I think she does a lot of cat rescue now. I might be wrong.
Yeah,
I may have got her mixed up with someone else, but her name rings a bell.
She's the sort of actress who's done well through her career, but she struck me as a really nice person when I worked with her, and it was a lot of fun. You gel with certain people, even though you may not work with them again. She was certainly a lovely lady.
And Octopussy. That's a one that everyone will have seen. So what did you do for Octopussy? Was that Roger Moore again?
That was mostly sort of general purpose stuntman, if you see what I mean. Yes. I think there were these tank sequences. I know we did stuff up at, I think, in the tank at Pinewood. They built sets and people had to fall into the water. It's very cold and what have you. It's the sort of job which you don't particularly look forward to, because it's the kind of thing where they're using stunt people because you're being subjected to unpleasant conditions which ordinary people wouldn't want to be subjected to. For example, they couldn't use extras or actors because of the risk factor and the unpleasantness of it. And those sort of jobs don't give you a lot of job satisfaction, because you're not doing it because you're highly skilled. You're doing it because you're prepared to put up with the pain and the punishment more than other people would. So it doesn't stand out as one of my greatest.
Not one of your faves.
No.
But Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. That
was fun. Again, it was another one with Harrison, so that made it enjoyable. And again, a general purpose stuntman, but more fun stuff. A lot of fighting and falling. And I remember Harrison had to throw me into this pit which was on fire, and I had to sort of rush at him with what appeared like a bit of like a javelin in a way, to go to spear him, and he had to grab it and flip me through the air and crash down into the tip, into the pit, flaming pit. Of course, it's not on fire when you're going into it. The effect is there around the outside, so it looks as if you're burning to death in the pit. But that was the kind of thing. Again, it was general purpose stunt work, but it was fun to work on. I think Vic Armstrong was the stunt coordinator, who's a good friend of mine, and I know he also doubled Harrison. But again, I didn't go away. I know they did go on locations on that one, but I didn't go on locations. I just did a lot of the studio work. And again, I'm not sure if that was EMI Studios or Pinewood, one or the other.
And then I think we're starting to move into the mid-80s, where I think a lot of what was probably UK work. So you were saying that you were hoping then to have a bit more time where you could have a dog.
I wanted to live at home a bit more, and I had my first bearded collie in 1970. But both my first beardie and my second one, because unfortunately I lost my first one when he was 6, he got acute peritonitis. And then Breck, my second one, after a year with no dog, he came along. And unfortunately, both the first two, I only spent about 6 months of the year with them. And I had good friends who they would stay with during the other time. And I just felt that dogs were becoming increasingly important to me as my companions, as I hadn't got married for whatever reason. And I therefore felt that I had made a good enough living to be able to choose work that suited me. And one of my prime reasons for choosing a particular job from the mid-80s onwards would be where it was, and could I have my dogs with me.
Right.
Oh, so it did make a big difference later on. And yes, I turned down a lot of prestigious movies, and a lot of people say, why the hell did you turn that down? And it would be simply because the locations would have involved me living out of a suitcase for 6 months or 9 months of the year and not seeing my dogs again. Oh. So that was why I decided that I had no particular desire for fame, and I'd already made my fortune, if you see what I mean, as much as I'd wanted to. And so therefore I picked work that suited me and suited me and the dogs from then on.
And bearded collie wise, where did you get your beardies from?
Well, my very first bearded collie came from Showstock. His name, Bramble, I called him, but he came from, I think you may know the name, I don't know, Jenny Wiggins.
Oh, Jenny, yes. Scapperfield.
Scapperfield was a son of Scapperfield, the one that won.
Scapper was the first obedience champion.
That's right. So that was why I'd looked through various breeds, and I thought Beardies looked like my Minnie, my Shaggy first dog, and I didn't want a poodle, and I didn't particularly want a smooth-haired dog. I liked the Shaggy dog look, and so that was why I went for a Beardie. And I'd say my first one came from her, and because the dog had ancestors had done well in obedience, and he was a lovely dog, and that was my first venture into Beardie College, 1970 that was.
And did you cope with the grooming? Because the
well, I did cope with the grooming. I never found it too much of an issue. I was not interested in showing the dog in any shape or form. I was only interested in tricks and obedience and companionship. So it didn't matter if they had the odd mat here or there.
No, that's certainly true. The coat is doesn't. It's now much worse though. The show.
Oh yes, so unfortunately with it, and I don't want to tread on people's toes here, but I felt after my third Beardie was the last show one I had, Bobby, but I felt they were going in the wrong direction. I felt that they were getting bigger, heavier, squatter, shorter legs, less able to run high speed, less agile, and of course the coat was becoming more and more unmanageable, which was why from about when Wurzel was my first working Beardie, and he was 1991 I got working. Right. He was my first working Beardie, and I've been working Beardie ever since.
Yeah.
Except, of course, Lottie, who's a rescue, and she's across.
Oh, but I think that's it. Beardies do look like a lot of crosses. I mean, that's a lot of people are attracted to them because when they remind them of a mutt that they loved very much.
That's right. Yes, I mean, especially the working Beardies. Unfortunately, the show ones they've got such huge and heavy coats now that they, from the point of view, and I don't know how they're doing in the sort of sales leagues at the moment, but I would have thought that for pet owners that the coat was quite a big impediment to ownership now with the showbred lines because of the amount of grooming.
It is a lot of grooming. I mean, I when I had a Beardie most recently, I had a grooming habit where that's the thing. I had a professional groomer that was on hand because I just didn't have enough hours in the day.
Yes, exactly.
And luckily, I've got really lovely groomers who I trust so much that they were part of his life. And groomed. So it is I think they were better when they were a bit shaggier and a bit more natural.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just looking on this list. Grange Hill. So you probably would have met the young Ant and Dec, or was that on Grange Hill?
No, I don't. I got the wrong one. There were various acts as kids who were on that who took on other jobs. I think Todd Carty went on to EastEnders. And did quite a lot of stuff with him. A lot of fights, kids' school fights and that sort of thing. And I know that I had a slight problem because I arranged this fight sequence where somebody got stabbed and they suddenly got very cold feet about this and said it's too realistic, it's too horrific. And the BBC got cold feet about having stuff on Grange Hill after that because they had various complaints that it was too realistic and too lifelike. Of course, nowadays where young people go around stabbing each other anyway, probably people wouldn't worry about it so much.
Nobody would notice. Dempsey and Makepeace. I used to love Dempsey and Makepeace.
Yes, that was another one like Professional, Sweeney and that sort of thing where you go off and you're called in to do odd jobs on it. On mostly car stuff. I think it was on Dempsey and Makepeace.
Yeah. Now this rings a bell. Whoops Apocalypse. I can't remember why, but
I can't. I know the name rings a bell. I know I worked on it, but don't ask me what I did. I can't remember it. It was a comedy, I think. And
yes, I think so. Oh, it might have been the Blot on the Landscape series. I
remember Blot on the Landscape because we shot that mostly nights in Bristol. Because I was working on something else in Pinewood in the day and commuting on my 1,000cc motorcycle between nights in Bristol and days at Pinewood Studios, and before the days of speed cameras, fortunately. So I was able to get from Bristol to London in X amount of time and back again. Not a good way to spend the whole week, working days and nights, but I got away with it.
And I think Living Daylights, that's another Bond, isn't it?
Yes, another Bond. I think that was a Timothy Dalton Bond. Again, doesn't stand out in my memory as anything special from my point of view.
No, just another Bond movie.
Yeah.
And you did Bread, Carla Lane's series.
Again, I think what I did. I think I stunt coordinated a couple of things on that.
Some fights,
a couple of fights, I think, between artists.
Carla's very runs a dog rescue now. So
right, okay.
Yeah, in Liverpool. She's very good on dog rescue. And then Rockcliffe's Babies. I remember.
Yes, that was another series. I was a stunt coordinator on that, and there was again lots of different stunts on that. Car stuff, fights, falls, and that sort of thing. I can recall the acts, what they looked like. I think one of the McGanns was on it. I can't remember which one.
Oh, yeah. But they all look very similar, don't they? That's their problem.
That's right. I can't remember the name of the actor who played Rockcliffe, but it was a run-of-the-mill sort of TV series. I was a stunt coordinator over a period of time on it. And again, you'd be called in for the days that you were needed as stunt coordinator.
But would your dogs be with you when you were doing this, or?
Well, the thing was with I don't know how much time you've got, but with the dogs, my film involvement with dogs came about because I was as stunt coordinator on productions, I was very unhappy with the standard of dogs that I was given. They were picked because of their looks and not because of what they could do. Very much like people to a certain extent in the industry. Right? Somebody would want a specific breed and they would say, I've got to have this Doberman. I can remember a case in point where they've got to have this Doberman because it's what we want. It's got to be a big, aggressive sort of dog to chase somebody up this scaffolding. And they couldn't get, the dog was frightened of the clapperboard, frightened of everything, didn't want to know. And I can remember I'd take the dogs with me because it was up in the north somewhere. I was doing it, staying in a hotel. And I think it was Bobby. And they said, we can't get anything out of this dog. Have you got your dogs with you? And I said, yes, I have. And they said, can your dogs do this? I said, yes, of course they can. So Bobby became, although Bearded Collie is hardly an aggressive looking dog, but because Bobby would chase anything that ran, they were very, very pleased. He did a marvellous job. And I decided, having been let down so much by dogs that couldn't learn sequences and couldn't do what was called in the strip, that I started to train my dogs to do sequences, to learn actions, and to learn to work to my hand signals, so that if you wanted to repeat an action in a dialogue scene where maybe your dog is sitting there and at the same moment it lies down at one point and you want to repeat that in the next take at exactly the same point, then you need a dog that will work the hand signals. And that was the kind of work I did with my dogs, and that's how I got so much work out of them in the latter part of my career, because people would ask for my dogs because they knew they'd save them so much time in shooting because they'd get what they were asking for.
Did you ever come across Anne Head?
I do recall Anne Head, yes. The thing was, I rather trod on the toes of the sort of professional animal handlers because, of course, I was doing them out of work, because I was the stunt coordinator on things, and because I had my own dogs there. Tully, for example, did several episodes of Midsummer Murders, and I can't think of the name of the dog handler on that. She was upset that my dogs were working on it because she felt that I was a professional stuntman and I should have kept to that part of it, not being a dog handler as well. But that's the way it goes in the industry. And as I say, the dogs had a good career, particularly Sandy, I think, of all my dogs, had a terrific career. And I had a period of time where my dogs did a huge number of stage shows. I've probably done 60 or 70 versions of the musical Annie over the years, because again, the dogs would work to hand signals, the dog would work to instructions and go on stage and do the bidding of the actress, the little girl, what have you, and play the part. And all I had to be was in the wings giving hand signals to the dog at the point where the dog had to leave or had to lie down or do various things. So although there was no money in that, I enjoyed doing it. You know, these amateur stage shows, I just asked them to make donations to charity. I never asked charity to be.
And didn't you sometimes have a part as well that you'd be like the...
I played, yes, there was this party man he called Lieutenant Ward, the policeman, and because it lent itself to working with a dog, I played that character over and over again because of the scene where the little girl is on stage before she sings Tomorrow, and the policeman walks on and sort of says, "Hey, little girl, that dog there, ain't he a stray? Ain't I seen him running around the neighbourhood?" And the whole thing, she says, "No, officer, he's my dog." I said, "Okay, it's your dog. You see, if it's your dog, what's his name?" She goes, "Well, I've called him Sandy on account of his nice sandy colour." So I said, "Okay," and I take the dog quite roughly off her and take him across the stage. Of course, she's got treats on her, which I haven't. And I said, "Okay, if he's your dog, call him." And she goes, "Well, I've only just got him and he doesn't always answer to his name." And I go, "Call him." And of course, she'd call him, and in rehearsals, of course, Sandy would always get treats. So, of course, he'd zoom across to her. And then I'd say, "Okay, maybe he is your dog, but next time I see you out with him, I want to see him on a leash and with a license. Or they'll take him to the pound and they'll put him to sleep." And then all that dialogue. I did it so many times. But it also made it more interesting to me because there were other scenes involving this Lieutenant Ward character, not all with the dog. And then at the end of the day, I had to bring him on the dog, and she thought she'd lost him forever. And I came on with this big Christmas present, being carried with me and one other person. And at the right moment in time, Sandy would burst out through the wrapping paper and they would be reunited again.
Oh, bless.
And that was fun to do. And the kids enjoyed it enormously, working with a dog they could trust. And although, as I say, it was not a lucrative thing in any shape or form, but I did loads of them and other musicals as well that involved dogs. But Annie was the most prolific one.
Oh, because Beardies were quite, well, not that familiar to people. So your dog being quite so prolific, really, all the numbers of things that you had your dogs on must have helped people understand that there is such a thing as a bearded collie. Because
yes, of course, you do find that if a dog is featured in a lot of TV stuff, it can help sales of the breed to a certain extent. I'm not sure how many members of the general public would know what breed they were, to be quite honest. A shaggy dog is a shaggy dog to a lot of non-doggy people. And, mine, of course, being working dogs, they were less stereotypical, if you see what I mean. A bearded collie and more a shaggy mutt.
Did you do many commercials with the dogs?
Yes, Sandy particularly did a huge number of commercials, which were great fun to do. He was also picked by Nationwide. They had a whole series of commercials on in-branch promotions, and Sandy was the Nationwide dog, and his poster was a big poster of him sitting when Nationwide did a whole series on their pet insurance. And Sandy had to create various mishaps. Of course, he loved doing various things that have gone wrong where they can claim on the insurance because of what the dog did. Like there was a scene where this couple have got a lovely white furniture and he's poured a glass of wine out, just sitting down with the wine and wife next to him, and Sandy launches himself from behind, goes straight over the settee, taking both wine glasses with him, and of course all the wine goes all over the furniture. And that there was a lot of different ones that I did with him. So he was, for a couple of years, he did a lot of stuff for Nationwide.
Oh,
and they were fun to do.
He was on our front cover as well. That was one of our best.
That's right, yes, he was a lovely dog, Sandy. Sadly not.
Absolute sweet.
2 years ago.
You were still prolific on television. I'm looking here, Only Fools and Horses, All Creatures Great and Small. You were in Batman, and considering you were putting your feet up because you wanted to spend more time with your dogs, you were still getting the work.
Oh, yes, the work was still coming in. That was why I was lucky, because I could be choosy over what I accepted because of the fact that I still had plenty to choose from. Yes. And, of course, when Midsummer Murders came along, I worked on that for probably 13, 14 years. And the reason I did that, part of it was fun to do, was I could take the dogs to work every day because we were always out in the country. And the dogs got used, they became part of the crew almost.
Oh, that's lovely. I know you seem to have got quite a few regulars. Looking at here, Poirot, let's see, Red Dwarf, you did one. One
yes,
or two.
A couple of Red Dwarfs, I can't remember what. I think one was hanging by a chandelier about 100 feet up and something. I can't remember what it was for, but I think that was Red Dwarf.
And Boone, I used to love Boone.
Yes, again, a couple of things on Boone. I did another series for 4 years, Ultimate Force with Ross Kemp, which was the big stunt series, a huge amount of work.
Yeah.
On that that ran from 2001 to 2005. And that was the same company that did Midsummer Murders. So during that time, I was working on both Midsummer Murders and Ultimate Force at the same time, going backwards and forwards from one production to the other, and also having my dogs on Midsummer Murders as well. And I had Tully in the Ross Kemp thing, Ultimate Force as well, but they cut his stuff out because he had to be shot. No, he had to be stabbed because he was giving the game away for the troops, and they ended up on the cutting room floor because the director quite rightly said, you can kill 100 people in an episode, but if you kill one dog, the public are going to hate you forever after. So it never made the made the cut.
One Foot in the Grave.
Did a few coordinating jobs on that, shot down in the Bournemouth area, I think.
Comic Strip Presents. They must have been jolly to do.
I did one called Mr. Jolly Lives Next Door. With Peter Cook played Mr. Jolly, and Aid Edmondson and Rick Mayo were the two characters. We had a lot of fun on that. They became good friends too. It was really great working with them.
Mr. Bean.
Yes, I did. I did Mr. Bean driving the Mini down the hill, sitting on the roof, driving it through the window with broom handles, controlling the controls.
That's very famous, that one.
In reality, I was lying on the floor under the seats, driving with a little camera and a small TV monitor, holding at the bottom of the steering wheel and just moving the steering wheel through my hands like this, but underneath the seat, with Rowan Atkinson sitting on the top.
Wow. And what was Rowan like? Because he's quite a serious chap, really.
He's very serious, but we had one thing that how we got on well together was cars.
Oh,
he was a great car enthusiast, as am I, and therefore we had that in common, so we didn't talk much about movies, we talked a lot about cars.
Oh, well, I can imagine you get on like a house.
He had a fabulous collection, including a McLaren F1.
Oh, really?
And a Bentley. He had an original 4.5 litre supercharged Bentley too.
Wow. And what did you have by this stage? Because you must have been...
I've been through an enormous number of high-performance cars. I had a series of AC Cobras, but unfortunately I still wish I had one because they're worth over £1 million now. If I kept all the cars I'd ever owned, I would have a fortune, but unfortunately I like to dabble around too much and I never kept anything for very long. I have various Ferraris and Porsches over the years. And even now I've got a couple of high performance cars, one called a Wildcat, which is an off-road racing vehicle with a big V8 in it, and another one called a Trackhawk, which looks like a sort of fairly civilized 4x4, but with a 720 brake horsepower engine in it, supercharged again. So still play about with my cars and my motorcycles as well.
Because you've done quite a few commercials where you had to do very precise driving.
Yes, a lot of precision driving stuff with cars, and cars particularly. Yes, good stuff. Commercials, because if you can negotiate a repeat deal on commercials, they can be very lucrative. I don't believe people can get away with it now, but we always used to make sure we had a repeat deal
Yeah.
involved.
So would you have ever fancied a go at being a Formula One driver or anything like that?
Because yes, certainly I would. I mean, I did do a bit of car racing, but obviously you can only do one thing. You can't do everything in life. It would have been nice to have had racing as another career, but I couldn't have ever fitted it in with the career that I did do. And I was very happy with the stunt work and the life that I led through stunting. Unfortunately, with motor racing, you need a lot of money, really. You need to have money behind you. Whereas with stunts, you're making money, you're not spending it.
Yes. And you did Lovejoy, which was another big famous series.
A lot of stuff with Ian McShane, who's great to work with.
His career's gone on and on and on, hasn't it? Because he's in big movies now. So
yes, he did that Deadwood thing, which went down very well, I think. And
he's in John Wick's, which is the perfect combination of stunts and dogs. Which I'm surprised you're.
Yes, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen him for a number of years, but then I did Lovejoy all the way through. But it wasn't a very stunty series.
No, I can't. It was quite sedate, really. But he's done remarkably well. Let's see, Touch of Frost. There was a bit of there. Pie in the Sky. That was a lovely, lovely program. I loved that one. The chap who went on to do. Did he do? No, it wasn't Rumpole the Bailey. It was another large chap, wasn't it? Who was the lead in Pie in the Sky?
Yes, I'm trying to think again. It was just odd fights. I think I had to do with that coordinating that.
And then Eddie Izzard. Definite article. What was that?
Don't ask me what I did on that because I cannot recall.
I remember. I'm a big fan of Eddie. And then Woof, you were a stunt coordinator.
A stunt coordinator on that. It was a doggy program, a kids' television thing where the dog could talk, and it didn't take on human form, but it could take on human characteristics. And it was purely coincidental because the director was a friend and he had me for the stunts and what have you. But the dog, I didn't provide the dog on that, so it was just coincidental. Yeah.
A lot of people very fond of that program.
Yes.
A Mind to Kill. Is that a Val McDermid? I think it might be.
That was a Welsh shot that in Wales. It was a series. Again, it was fights, mostly fights, I think. Some falls, bit of car stuff, a mixed bag. Again, the director was a lovely lady, Gwenham Sage, friend of mine now. And so I did quite a few bits on that. And that was in Cardiff. We always went down to the studios at Cardiff to do that.
Not too far to do that. 28 Days Later. Now that's another big film, isn't it? So that's 2000.
Yeah, again, I just played. I was just a stunt driver on that, doing costume.
But that was all about. Wasn't it about a bit like COVID? It was some sort of illness or something. Right?
That's right. Yes, I mean, to be quite honest, a lot of stuff, if you just do odd days on it, you don't get a script of the whole thing. You get.
So you don't know what the story is.
You don't know what the story is, and I'm not a great movie buff, unfortunately.
Oh, really? So you don't actually.
Well, I have to confess, I have never seen any of the Star Wars movies all the way through.
Really?
I haven't ever seen any of them all the way through. I'm not a great science fiction fan, so I'd seen obviously bits of them, and then you go to these conventions. And people are asking you questions about the stories and the script and the characters. And I say, I'm sorry, but I don't know.
You've never seen them?
These nerdy people know every character in it.
They probably know.
They're coming up with parts that I played in these movies, and I can't even remember doing it. Oh, I played a character in the Star Wars movies called Devin Kant. And I'm often asked to sign things. Well, I'm in this costume playing this character, and I think, I can't really remember what I did with that character. But okay, I'll sign. Colin Skeaping as Devin Kant.
Oh,
it keeps
so
them happy.
Funny. Oh.
I'm not a great movie fan, really.
No, well, that seems really fun that you've been in more films than some people have ever watched, and you yourself haven't probably watched them. And then I can never say that one. Dalziel and Pascoe.
Yes, I know the one you mean. That was a northern thing. I don't know if it was Birmingham or Manchester or somewhere like that. It was with Warren Clark and Robson Green, I think, were in there. And again, just different stunts. Mostly cars and fights.
And then the Bill, you did 37
a lot of the Bill over
episodes.
The years. I can't remember how many of those I did. Again, a lot of stunt coordinating on it. Again, it was fight stuff, car stuff, that sort of thing. And some of the actors became good friends. I could, for example, the actor who played, I think it was Carver in the Bill, I first worked with on Quadrophenia.
Oh, really? You see, Quadrophenia is not on the list here. So this
funny.
is the full list.
I don't know who makes up these lists, but obviously certain things escaped. I was a stuntman on Quadrophenia. We all stayed down in Brighton and had a great time down there. And I can remember the actor, what was his name, who played Jim Carver in the Bill, was also played one of the young guys in Quadrophenia. And of course, Phil Davis and Phil Daniels I'd worked with again over the years, who played in Quadrophenia.
Mm-hmm. And when you were on Ultimate Force, because that was 21 episodes, did you get to know Ross Kemp quite well?
Yes, pretty well. But he when I was talking about stunt actors, he was one of the ones that thought that he could do his own stunts, but I managed to convince him that it wasn't a very good idea quite early on. And we had a good relationship after that because I showed him a particularly dangerous stunt being done by somebody who was doubling him. And I said, look, come and watch this, Ross, and you tell me whether you'd be happy doing this. And the guy had to do a big fall off something and crashing down into something else. And I could see Ross swallowed and said, well, maybe not. And then I said to him, well, let me be the judge of what it's safe for you to do and what it's not safe for you to do, and we can work together on that basis. So after that, he was always fine.
Oh, you trained him. And I remember, I don't know how I must have researched this, and I can't remember where I got it from, but quite early on in your career, you had quite a nasty fall because of somebody didn't like cardboard boxes, so they made you do. Was it Stanley Kubrick?
No, I know. Oh, yeah, I thought you were talking about the one where I fractured my pelvis. No, in the Kubrick film, it was Clockwork Orange.
Oh, right. You see, that's not on the list either.
No, well, I did quite a lot of work on Clockwork Orange. I played in the Billy Boy gang, the gang that had the fight at a casino at Tags Island, Hampton Court, which of course is no longer there. Before they knocked it down. And Kubrick was a very difficult man to work for and wanted everything done for real. And I had to do this high fall onto a table, but he didn't want it to be done in two halves. So I had to actually do it from a height back onto a table. And of course, I crashed through the table, banged my head on the floor, and got up to look at about 20 feet and on my back. And I got up to look at the take to see if he was happy with it. The next day, I remember waking up in Kingston Hospital. I'd suffered from, not delayed unconsciousness, but I was back on the movie the next day. I'd have been sacked if I wasn't. It was the way he worked.
Well, weirdly, I've got a Stanley Kubrick. I don't have many anecdotes, but Stanley Kubrick was a Dogs Today reader.
Really? Oh.
I don't know if he ever told you about his dogs, but he'd got golden retrievers.
I never, as I say, just as a performing stuntman, this was in about 1970 odd. It was a long time ago. I didn't get to know Kubrick particularly well. I just knew that if you were 1 minute late for work, you would get fired.
Yes,
and that if you didn't do exactly the way he wanted it done, he rant and rave. So he wasn't a stuntman's favourite director for that reason.
No. But he had enormous patience with his dogs, though, because the reason we found out he was a reader was somebody who worked for him phoned up and said, can you help? Because the golden retrievers keep chewing their way out of the kitchen, and they don't wait for us to open the door. They just chew a hole in the door. is there a dog flap big enough for a golden retriever? And so we sourced one, and they were so delighted, and they were really friendly after that. And Mrs. Kubrick sent us a big book of her paintings, many of which involved their golden retrievers. And apparently the only two publications that he ever subscribed to and read were Variety and Dogs Today.
Oh, really? Oh, well, I didn't know about that. But then, of course,
he's probably nice to his dogs, but not nice to people. So
yes. Well, a lot of people I know. I think it's more important to be nice to dogs, to be quite honest, than people.
Definitely.
People can take it. Dogs, you need to be nice with dogs, I think, all the time.
No, but that was that's my only big. Apart from Tom Hardy's, my other anecdote.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Lovely Tom. When he was a little young actor, used to ring up all the time to see if we would feature his dog Max, and we didn't know who Tom was, and we sent the work experience girl to interview him, and she took her mum with her.
Oh, right, as a chaperone.
Well, she couldn't drive; she was so shy, and he was so lovely to her, and gave this massive, really opened his heart about how Max had changed his life, and how he was a bad boy, and the dog had been the only one who loved him, and he used to take him into acting lessons, and. But yeah, it was the first. It keeps getting quoted, and the little girl who was, what an amazing work experience thing for her. But Tom absolutely loves his dogs. I mean, good guy.
Well, I always say, if somebody loves dogs, they can't be all bad.
Well, exactly.
I think that animal lovers make nicer people.
Definitely. And once you get people talking about dogs, they tend to, everything else sort of goes sideways, doesn't it?
Yes.
So does Harrison Ford have dogs? I mean, I hope
he does. I believe we never really, of course, he never, in those days, I didn't take the dogs to work. And if I did, I would keep them away from the set, because that was before I started working my dogs on film and TV. So, yes, I think he may have had a golden retriever. Don't quote me on this, but I know he did have a dog at his ranch in California, and I think it may have been a retriever, but it may not have been.
No, yeah, he looks like the sort of person.
Yes, yeah,
would like dogs. The first time I ever saw you, Colin, was on Crufts television doing agility with a brown beardie. Does that make sense?
Yes, I have. I mean, I've had slate and brown beardies that I've done crafts. It depends how many years ago it was.
I think it was because it was unusual to see a beardie doing agility in those at that level. So were you the first to do really, really well?
Well, I think Joe Sermon, who had a brown beardie called Yogi, and me with my slate beardie called Wurzel. Those were the first two beardies that hit it big time in agility and put beardie collies on the map as far as agility was concerned. And they, of course, were both working dogs. And so he may have, I say, Joe's did very well with Yogi, and I did very well with Wurzel. He was slate. My first brown beardie that did well with agility was Finn. Unfortunately, his career was cut short when he got hit by a car and had his front leg badly broken, and he had to retire from agility. And that was when he started his film career, his Annie career rather, based on the fact that he was bored because he couldn't do agility anymore, and because he was lovely with people and so clever. That was why he was my first Annie dog, if you see what I mean. I had 3 Annie dogs over the years, and it was Finn first, then Tully, who was very dark bearded. Tully got away with it because I changed the line and in the script where she says, I called him Sandy on account of his nice sandy colour. And when she said, shall I change it to on account of his nice black colour? I said, no, keep to the script, and I will, as Lieutenant Ward. So I would, as she said, I call it, because she panics. I said, panic it, make it like you're not sure what you're saying. And she said, I called him Sandy on account of his nice sandy colour, and looking at him saying, what have I said? And I'd look the dog up and down and go, sandy colour, huh? And then that got over that problem. But so I had two dogs, Finn and Tully, both doing Annie's at the same time. And then, of course, Sandy, when I lost Finn, Sandy took over. And I called him Sandy because I knew I'd got him to take over from Finn anyway, so he didn't have to learn another name.
No, that was very astute, very good. And did you always, because having visited where you live now, have you always had like a field full of agility equipment everywhere you are?
No, unfortunately. Since I moved here 10 years ago, I run my class here too, agility class, and I've got the room for it. But in previous houses, I've had equipment, but only sort of in back garden stuff. I couldn't have complete courses set over a big area because I didn't have the area.
No.
The last house I had before this, I had for 15 years, and it had 1/3 of an acre garden, but that's just not enough for a full set of agility equipment. Mm-hmm. So it's only since I lived here that I've had the full works.
Because the dogs, I've observed, they get so excited when they know they can go over there and.
Well, they love agility. It's probably of all the dog sports, it's the one that dogs love the most if they are athletic and working type dogs, because they love that relationship where they're not being constrained on a lead or not. Like, say, obedience, where you've got to work very closely with the handler. The fact you're encouraging them, in actual fact, to work further and further away from you, so that you're ending up with more and more hand signals and more body language and less verbal commands. And therefore, it's something that working dogs do love.
Mm. And one of the things that I've loved is that video that you've done where you were lying on a recliner while your dogs were doing.
Oh, that was Eddie. I did a series of videos called Couch Potato Agility, where I'd set up courses and I would sit on the couch or with a glass of wine and direct him round the course, just sitting there. And then he'd come back to me at the end and I'd say, that is how to do it, and then have a sip of wine with and that was Eddie, because when I first trained Eddie, I'm sorry that somebody
calling you up. You're in demand.
Skype. I've got to get rid of that. So I got rid of that.
I'll let you go soon, because you've been doing this for some time.
Well, yeah, I said Skype me at 20:45. I'll be clear by then.
The time has gone so quickly. But right at the beginning of your career, you thought, no, I don't want to be a teacher, but yet you now teach people agility, and you're much in demand, aren't you?
Skype noise was setting off. So can you repeat that last question?
Oh, right. When you were a young man, you decided you didn't want to be a teacher. You wanted to, but now you are a good teacher.
Well, it's going back in a way, yes, because I'm training other people with agility and obedience as well. Let's go!
But you're yes, and it is a big community, isn't it? Because you've got lots of fans. Because they're probably all watching at the moment, probably saying, "Yes, that's a dog that wants something." I think your dogs are telling me that it's time to wind things up. You've been very good. They've been very good. So, do you still do any work with the dogs, or are you?
Very little, but I don't want to dwell on my physical problems. Lyme disease has crippled me now, and I can't walk very well, and I cannot run around like I used to. Unfortunately, it's what it is. It's a disease which is not recognised by the medical profession and not taken seriously, but it cripples a lot of people. And unfortunately, I've had it for a long time and not realised I've had it. I was wrongly diagnosed and treated for rheumatoid arthritis for 5 years, which I didn't have. And unfortunately, the Lyme is taking its toll, and that has put the end to my stunt career, and there's also, of course, put the end to my agility career as well.
Oh,
Because I can't compete anymore because I cannot run.
oh, that's so awful. And do you think, because Lyme disease, for people who don't know, isn't that tick? A tick
bite. It's from a tick bite, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
But unfortunately, the medical profession does not treat it seriously because they don't believe you can have a tick bite and the Lyme can then affect you for the rest of your life. They think that if you go on a short course of antibiotics, you should technically be cured. So they think then you're a malingerer if you continue to have pains and problems. And of course, chronic Lyme disease, it gets into your cells. Your whole body is dominated by this disease.
Oh dear.
Even my brain is affected by it. But I really don't want to dwell on that because it's not what people want to hear.
Oh, it's so sad. But did you? You were going to try something new? Are there any treatments?
I've never given up fighting it. And I've tried so many different things. I'm trying a drug at the moment which was meant for alcoholics to fight alcoholism. It's had a lot of success with people in America taking it, but again, I'm doing it without any kind of medical supervision because they don't want to know in this country. All I can say is that it's stopped me getting any worse since I started that 4 months ago, which is the first thing that's held it in abeyance. It's not a cure. I cannot take enough of it for it to be a curative because it makes me too sick. It's like chemo in a way. It makes me so sick I can't eat. But there you go. It is what it is. I've got it, and I've had a good life, and that's it really with Lyme.
But you've got two gorgeous dogs there, and the way that they arrived, that neither of them were working out where they were. Is that right? They were.
Banjo went into the wrong home totally as a puppy. He was bought by a lady with 3 small children living in a 3rd floor council flat with no garden. And being a working dog, he tore the place apart. So I took him on with a view to finding a home for him. Decided he would stay, and then I lost my last 2 of the working ones I'd had. Tully and Sandy I lost. I'd already lost Eddie from cancer. They all went in the same year. And then Lottie came along again. I was asked to foster her till they could find a home for her. She was 4.5 when I took her on. She's a beardy border cross, very clever, very keen to work. So she's having a good time, and they love each other and they get on well together, don't you?
Oh, it's lovely because you were worried at first that they wouldn't. I remember there was a breakthrough.
She was a bit messed up when she first came. She didn't like him. She didn't like any other dogs. But she loves him now, and they get on really well.
Oh,
the only thing is you have to keep throwing balls for her to keep up.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Colin, for spending so much time telling me all these things. I've been dying to ask you lots of questions, so this is a fantastic excuse. And you really need to write a book, and I need to find someone who will help you.
I don't know, but we'll see.
And we should get a documentary of all your marvelous anecdotes, because you've got so many things.
Some of the things that pass through my mind fleetingly, and I think I should really note that down. But it is what it is, and I'm busy with the dogs as much as I can be, and coping with this awful disease. And whether I'm
and the pandemic as well.
Yes, that's been hard work because, of course, I've had to socially isolate totally because my immune system has been destroyed by the Lyme disease, so I cannot go out anywhere since the pandemic struck. So it has rather sort of kept us at home, but the 2 doggies have been happy.
Yes, all the dogs love the lockdown, don't they? They were all love us being at home.
Yeah.
But you've still got motorbikes as well, because I
still got several motorcycles as well. Yes, a lot of them are dead now. A lot of the racing ones no longer run, but I still got them.
Because I think I saw a Facebook update where you were going. You had to go to the hospital for some reason, but you went on a motorbike.
I always make hospital appointments on a motorcycle so you can park outside. You don't pay charges, you just park on the pavement somewhere. So even now all my hospital appointments are done by motorcycle.
And I'd forgotten, there's a couple of really famous stunts that we haven't mentioned. There's the bit in The Young Ones where the very last scene where Vivian
bus off the cliff.
Drives the bus. And so you were Vivian, the guy with the red hair. And
the last episode, I drove the bus all over. It was in Kent somewhere. And then in the very final scene, drove it off the cliff. It did a complete somersault and landed back on its wheels. And then we blew it up.
Fantastic. And you were Joanna Lumley's stunt double on The Avengers?
Lovely Joanna on the New Avengers I did.
New Avengers.
Yeah.
And was she lovely? Please say she was lovely.
We're allowed to do that nowadays because with all this gender business, a man isn't allowed to double a woman anymore. But in those days, it didn't matter. You had a hole in it. You punctured it.
Well, you've got so many stories, and we've got through some of them, but I'm still sure there are loads and loads of things that I'll remember as soon as we finish this. That I say I should have brought that up.
Well, never mind. Perhaps talk again
another time. We can do a part 2. Yeah. All your Star Wars fans are probably watching this because I tipped them off that you were going to be on here. So at the moment, do you because of COVID, I suppose those big what are they? What do they call them? These events where they go and queue up and get autographs.
The Star Wars conventions.
Oh yes. So do they fly you over and sort
Well, no, because unfortunately I was due to go to Los Angeles and didn't go because of my health more than anything else. I've done quite a few over the years, but mostly in this country because they wanted me to. I've had lots of requests to go abroad, but right now I'm not going anywhere, especially in a plane with the virus as it is.
No.
So I'm limited to private signings here or to conventions that I can get to there and back in the day from home.
Gosh, no, it's fantastic talking to you about all this, and let's do it again another time. But okay, I'm going to let you go because we've done this for 2 hours.
Yes, I didn't realise that's why they're Skyping me. Because
that's why
I said to my brother, "I'll be free by quarter to 9."
That's it. Once we start. But thank you so much, Colin. Absolute joy talking to you, and thanks to the dogs for being so patient. And all right, all the best, Colin.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.